Welcome to The Real Truth. Today's guest is John Archibald, one of my old buddies back in the days of our Issues Birmingham. He was my first guest then, and he's still with me. How you doing, John?
Doing great. How are you? Now that you've been silenced by the man.
This is The Real Truth with Tommy Spina. I am Tommy Spina, and I hope today's guest, John Archibald, enlightens you to the real truth. John Archibald is a Pulitzer Prize winner and has been around Alabama for many years, and I hope you will listen and enjoy this program. How you doing, John?
Doing great. How are you? Now that you've been silenced by the man.
Well,
Not
it's flattering. It's flattering to think of it like that in some ways, but it's frightening in many other ways. It's very peculiar, the timing of it all, especially with a TV program that was supposed to be dedicated to local community affairs and events, which they don't have now. They run their 3340 news on the 3 a.m. shift, and they call that as fulfilling their requirements under the FCC. I do believe that to be the case. But what's been going on in your life since you're still in Birmingham? I notice your cohort moved off to get closer to the capital.
Yeah, well, my only area of expertise is Alabama, so I don't need to stray too far. But it's a crazy world you talk about. We got fragmented media, and a lot of institutions under assault, and so it keeps us busy trying to track it down. Been working on a lot of podcasts and things like that.
Yeah, and it's called Shrapnel, or was
American
that just
Shrapnel.
that episode?
No, the podcast is called American Shrapnel. It's a 8-part series on both Eric Robert Rudolph and the sort of the rise of Christian nationalism. So it's like half true crime and half
reality.
It's so how did we get here kind of stuff.
Well, that's a good segue into the reason I wanted to talk to you. How did we get here, and where did we come from? So as we exchanged ideas this morning, it was like Article 3 allows for the judiciary. Article 1 allows for the freedom of speech and press. But what was going on historically back at the time? I'm assuming you've looked into that, which makes the press such an important part of our governmental functions, especially as they relate to the so-called 3 branches of government, which are a blurred line right now, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, because all of the checks and balances are at risk, and you go back to the start. Jefferson famously. He hated the press, right? But but at the same time, he said he'd rather have, dang, I forgot the quote now.
I've read it. I've read it. I can't remember it right now either, but if Tommy were here today, he would know.
Yeah, I can't believe I can't remember that. But that's the way it goes, I guess. But it's you can't have a democracy without freedom to without information, and that doesn't mean information you agree on. It means information that can provide people with an educated way to examine what's going on around them. And we're just so fragmented now. We're so dependent on the whims of billionaires and political sort of assaults on the kind of media it's hard to even describe what media is now, because what is it, a politically funded website of media? Is it traditional news that that corrects its errors and abides to a certain ethical standard, but is labeled the fake news. So I mean, it's very difficult.
So
At the same time, when the courts are also, underthought, the universities, the other institutions that sort of work to keep us on track.
well, I call this first, I guess you call it, series that I'm doing, The Rule of Law. And I've tried to stay on that track. But some seem to not understand what is meant by that. But I know I referred to it as Article 1. I really meant the First Amendment. But I think the rule of law means that not the president, not Congress, not the courts stand above the primary document, which is the Constitution. And it's supposed to be keeping power chained to principle. And I think our founders divided the government into three branches to keep everyone honest. Hence the expression checks and balances. But they also gave us something more. They gave us, in the First Amendment, not just the freedom of speech, but the freedom of press. And I think the words you were trying to recall, I have located. Jefferson said, were it left to me to choose between a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I'd prefer the latter.
Right. Thank you.
So that's how he felt about it. So the press back in the day was somewhat of a watchdog of the other branches, a check on the power and not a partner in the power. Now it's almost like we've created a fourth branch of government, to me.
Or we've consolidated. But, go ahead. Let me finish that thought.
I have. It's like, it depends on what you're watching. If you're watching Fox News, you're getting story A. If you change a channel, you get story B. And so what I wanted this show to be was, at least from our perspectives, we may be criticized for calling it the real truth. But as far as I'm concerned, that's what I'm speaking. And I know you are speaking that because you have always just let it go, no matter where it fell, and spun it in a way. And I don't mean spin in a negative way. It's just your style of writing. My daughter really tuned me into something about haters last night. We were talking because I have some haters. You have some haters. I think
you got to if you're gonna try to say what you need to say, you're gonna have them.
Well, that's because what we're saying matters. If it didn't matter,
I hope so.
Well, I want to believe that. So here we are back in. And by the way, I noticed that. What's the guy that does the documentaries all the time?
Ken Burns.
Yeah, he's doing American Revolution. I think it comes out mid-November on PBS.
I hope we get to see it because we may not have PBS here in Alabama at that point. I mean, Sesame Street and Ken Burns are going to be victims of the world today.
But I'm just thinking back at the time that they wrote these words. Clearly, there were problems that were being thwarted by the king that the founders of our country felt needed to be tweaked and addressed in an official document, which forms the foundation of the Bill of Rights.
Absolutely.
And here we are in 2025, almost 250 years later, wondering if that principle is still in existence. We've got to, and when I say we, I'm not trying to make this us and them. I'm just saying we can all agree to disagree.
Well, I claim no political party. I mean, this is you just look at the history of this country and our ability to know things, to find things out, whether it's Watergate, whatever party is involved. I mean, it's critical to being able to run. And the First Amendment, guarantees freedom of religion and press and assembly and all that. All of these things are, interpreted in a different way all of a sudden. Freedom of religion now seems to mean freedom to be a Christian, which is sort of ironic. And freedom of the press is, widely considered to be secondary, and assembly is under assault too. Go down the list. I mean, until you get to the Second Amendment, you're a little bit worried. But look at everything that's happened in this state that we, have seen progress in over the last 60 years, whether it's the Civil Rights Act, whether it's, the settlement of Montgomery March, whether it's any of these things when King and those guys came down, the only reason, and they said time and time again, the only reason they were successful was because of, federal judges, number one, and the press who was able to get their message out. And if you can't freely get your message out to broad audiences in a believable way, then we're sort of doomed. And you could argue that we can get our message out because we can put anything on the internet, but you can't believe any of it. AI has made us even less trustworthy of anything that goes out in that environment, and the algorithms suppress real news in favor of fake news. We have got to figure this out, or we're going to be in really deep trouble.
Well, I think one of the flaws in the mindset of many is that the press is our enemy.
It's a very orchestrated, strategic effort over the last 30 years to drive that message home, to give the power to basically, because it's uncomfortable. I mean, the whole idea that I was brought up in newspapers, and newspapers, of course, are a term of the past, but in news, it's that, our job is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. You don't punch up, you don't punch down, you punch up. You find, you look for people in power who are doing the people wrong, and you look for the people who've been wronged, and you write about those things. And it's been so turned on its head in this new environment where it's just you attack the press, you call it fake, you call it the enemy of the people in order to discredit it, so that you can do whatever you want. And we see it on on state level, we see it on the national level, and it's poison. And anyway, sorry for my rant.
No, I want you to rant.
Frustrating.
I need rant. Well, I mean, in reality, the press is not the enemy. It's one of liberty's greatest allies, quite frankly.
Well, explain to me this. Why is it? I mean, you're a lawyer, you know this. If I write something willfully false or negligent about you that hurts you, you call me up and say, you got to correct that error. And I'll correct that error, no doubt. I'm sure my lawyers will tell me to correct that error. And if I don't, then you sue me for libel and you collect whatever, is deemed to be appropriate. But if you're on social media, for instance, or on, you say, anonymously, or even with your name most of the time, something about people. And my, if I do it, my publication gets sued too. But if you put it on Twitter, nothing happens because they're not responsible for what goes on there. So, the rules that apply
to newspapers, to media, to legitimate media do not apply to the institutions that are now spreading most of the information and suppressing most of the well-reported information.
Well,
we need I mean, nobody. We have to regulate AI and the social media empires, or they have to have the same rules that we do.
Well,
there has to be a fairness doctrine, or else we can't run a democracy.
Well, doesn't that sort of speak not so complimentary to the people that are beholden to the words that are being put out on all those social mediums in existence?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it would seem to me we need to educate the listeners that all that glitters is not gold, to use an expression that just popped into my head. But you basically can't believe anything. And here I am calling a podcast The Real Truth. It's really just me and you expressing what we see from the outside looking in. But there are at least 75 million people that would disagree with us right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and those are just voters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the other day I was looking for a story I had written in 2008, and because the archives on the internet are messed up too, I Googled it, and the Google AI popped up. Yeah, I mean, I Googled my story. I mean, it was like, and it was a story that I'd written, and I about. It was a column I'd written. It was not a good one, frankly, but it was about. I just found out that my wife, when she was 7, had been entered in this Miss Confederate Alabama pageant by her parents, and that's very unlike her because she was the last person you'd expect to do that. But so I did it. I Googled it, Miss Confederate, whatever, and John Archibald, and up popped the AI story about what it was, and it was complete fiction. It said that I had written this story about this person, and it had generated such anger that I had been forced to go into hiding, and my publication had to start printing me anonymously, none of which was remotely true. And so I said, I'm going to write about that. So I wrote about that. And then right before publication, I decided to Google myself again and see if it was still there. And a completely different fiction popped up about the same incident. And it's like completely rewriting the story of our lives. While at the same time, Google now suppresses, basically, you can't, if you Googled my story, it wouldn't come up until very far down the line. So the first thing people are reading, and people are lazy, don't forget, they've been trained over the years by Google that they can trust that site, that spot. But now, instead of giving you the real truth, to use your phrase, they're giving you this faulty AI fictional account of what took place in my reality. Do I have any recourse to them to say, well, you just wrote a story that's completely false about me? And apparently I don't. So, and that coupled with over the last couple of years, we used to be able to, Facebook sort of devoted itself at one point in time to spreading, to being a friend of news, right? They would, you share links there, and a lot of people were able to, we were able to get a lot of people to read our stories by putting them on Facebook. Now, if I put a link to my story on Facebook, it's suppressed and it gets almost no views. If I were to copy my entire columns and put them on Facebook without a link, then it would do very well. But that doesn't, help my company. So news entities are closing daily.
Well, I want to address that, but I noticed, especially AL.com several years ago, eliminated the ability to comment. And I know that was done because people were out of control. Our friend Carol Robinson does post her stories on Facebook, and she gets slammed pretty good by some people.
Yeah, me too.
You get slammed.
Oh yeah, I mean
Haters gonna hate.
both sides. You get both sides, That's I mean the readers are great. They're great. Most of them are great. But you're always going to get some that aren't. But that's if you're not making somebody mad, you're not doing your job.
Well,
And if you're doing it just to be liked, you're in the wrong business.
Well, would you agree with me to take it to a different level than just what's going on locally, but what's going on nationally? That the press in this day and age, which gets me into that fourth branch of government mentality, just doesn't report the story. They often frame the story, and they don't simply cover policy that's coming from up above. Sometimes they shape it. And they can make or break, just like you just mentioned, the reputation of any individual in a single headline. So when a person can be condemned by a news cycle and instead of having their case heard by a jury, when prosecutors are being pressured by public outrage as opposed to evidence, we're drifting away from justice, and really it's becoming like a spectacle to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to. I mean, when we say the press, what is the press? Is Fox News the press? Is MSNBC the press? Is it just the New York Times and Post and Wall Street Journal? Is it somebody? Are you the press at this point? Because you're certainly media. So I mean, it to me, there's never been a more important time for us to, reestablish ethics, but part of it too is because the business models are just so broken by the internet, and we're so fragmented that that so many people, in order to reach people, focus on stories that really don't matter, right? And so we have one of the things, a lot of stories on our site that are the best news are the least well read because of multiple factors. One, because people want to read about, the latest legendary country music star who did something wrong or whatever it is. But the algorithms immediately take what's popular and put them at the top, and take what's less popular and scoot them down to the bottom. So if you write a really, really important story about politics or the state auditor's office doing something, it's going to get pushed down and nobody's going to see it, increasing the perception that news isn't being covered well. But the delivery systems sort of fuel this idea. It's like going to the grocery store and eating nothing and buying nothing but candy.
Right.
And so that's a problem. But you also have the political divides. If there's coverage on anything, there'll be you can watch Fox News and get one version, and watch MSNBC and get another, and you won't be able to talk about it with each other because you have completely different perceptions of what took place in the reality, and that's a problem. And what bugs me the most is when people start telling me how terrible the New York Times is, and they clearly don't know the fact checking process that goes on there, and the fact that they do correct their errors and they abide by a particular journalistic ethic, and whether you agree with them, their editorial page or their politically, is sort of irrelevant because they're not going to print it if they can't prove that it happened. And so it just really disturbs me when we demonize the people who do it best, and and listen and read, people who were politically funded or who, ignore basic news if it's politically expedient.
Well, I can't disagree with you with respect to the New York Times. It's one of my publications, and I know that would put me in a pigeonhole of being a liberal because I read
Which
the
is
New York.
crazy, though. I mean,
It is crazy.
They have all kinds of views on there, and but I mean, but take the Wall Street Journal. That'll be fine. I mean, they're more conservative. They still abide by the rules of journalism. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be the Times. There are places you can still do it, but there are not as many as there. I mean, every day there's fewer and fewer of them. Which is, I mean, it's largely because of changes in technology and the internet and people's habits. But it's also very, I think, an intentional strategy to get that burr out of the saddle of people who want to run for office and do whatever they want.
Well, I was speaking with a guest last week, Joellen Beckham. You know her? She has the bigbluedot.com. She started it some time ago, and most recently has been funding through donations billboards around town.
Oh, yeah. She's the one doing that.
Yes. And because she identified those people as not Republican or Democrat, but as drivers. So
right.
She could get her message to drivers.
That's probably a really good strategy right now.
I made the point to her that it seems that there are a good number of people that are being validated by this message that's being sent down from above. But that's probably half of our country. So what does that say about our country? Is our country, I went back and read the Declaration of Independence just for the fun of it. I even wrote a piece for AL.com, an op-ed piece, but what I came away with, not much has changed in 250 years in principle. And, we're still arguing about tariffs. We're still arguing about taxes. We're still arguing about immigration, which is what I guess the founders were thinking about when they created. I mean, it took them 10 years to make the Constitution. I think it was intended to be amended, and no intention there to rhyme, but it does come out that way.
Good on you anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you foresee the press ever hearing what we're saying and adjusting and adapting and pivoting away?
Well, I mean,
to the way things used to be?
Well, I mean, there's not one press. And I mean, I guess there never has been, but in the days when, we threw newspapers on people's yards and everybody picked them up and read the same thing in the same sort of order. And then we had the same conversations. The world doesn't exist anymore because we're so fragmented and people are not, there is no fairness doctrine that requires any sort of, responsible reporting for the way it once did. So it's like the Tower of Babel. We're all talking, everybody's talking, but nobody's on the same page. So, I mean that it's going to be a struggle to get people to be on any kind of same page. It may take some terrible disaster, or it may take some technological advance that's going to allow it to happen. But right now, we just got to keep trying. We just got to keep trying.
Reminds me of the Nielsen song. Everybody's talking at me, but not hearing a word I'm saying.
exactly what it is. And a lot of people are they're just so overwhelmed by it that I've never heard so many people say they just can't watch the news or they can't they can't read the news anymore because it's too overwhelming for them. And I fully understand that, the attraction of that, but if you follow it to a conclusion, it ends badly.
Got any suggestions on how we get back in the right lane?
I mean,
or has it gone too far? I don't know how to correct the problem unless we throw away cell phones.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be a good start. I can't wait to retire, so I'm going to do my best to do that, or at least get off all the socials. Yeah, I'm going to have to keep it so I can do my New York Times crossword. But other than that, people ask me that a lot. What do you do? Because there are a lot of people who are despairing right now. I'm sure that no matter what happens, there'll be half of the people be despairing. But I think of that podcast that I just got through doing. There's a guy when the Birmingham abortion clinic was bombed in 1998. Nobody knew who had bombed the Olympics 2 years before at that time. But the clinic was bombed, and there's this kid named Jermaine Hughes, who's a student at UAB, who was doing his laundry at his dorm, and he heard the explosion, and he looked up, and everybody was running toward the blast, and he saw this one guy walking away without looking back to see what happened. And he something in his gut told him he needed to follow that guy, and he ended up following him through Southside up the mountain on this wild adventure, trying to get people to help him. He'd watching this guy go behind a building and put on a wig or take it off or whatever, and he just kept going. Even when he stopped and called police at the 911 up at McDonald's. It used to be up by Vulcan, and even they didn't believe him, but he just kept saying, my gut tells me this is wrong, and it ended up, and it identified Eric Rudolph, turned out to be the serial bomber and Olympic bomber, and launched the largest manhunt in American history. And it's only because he just kept walking and doing the things his gut told him to do, what he thought was right. And that's the only answer I got. I mean, that's the same thing John Lewis did on Edmund Pettus Bridge, too. Walking into a whipping, but putting one foot in front of the other. So you just can't give up on what made this country great, truly great.
And, we're not looked upon with great favor around the globe these days. For a variety of reasons, which makes me hesitant to even want to travel. Well, of course, traveling right now, I had booked a flight to Minneapolis to celebrate a memorial of a lawyer friend of mine that had passed. But as I was watching the news, he was trying cases into his 90s. It'd probably be like me. Die in a courtroom and cause a mistrial.
That's a good way to go.
I'd prefer to go in my sleep if I got to go. Whatever it is, I want it to be quick.
Well, if you were me, you could go in your sleep in the courtroom.
I have a friend that's my age, maybe 2 years older than me, and it's hard to continue to do what we've done 20 years ago with this energy level that we don't have anymore. And so at lunch, he has to take a nap. And he was napping in the courtroom on a wooden bench. And he probably had some Chick-fil-A wrapper over his chest. And the bailiff had failed to lock the door. And one of the jurors, or a couple of them, came back in early and saw him. And
No.
the case went on, and they acquitted his client. One of the jurors came up to him after it was over with and told them that they knew they were going to find his client not guilty after seeing what he did during the lunch period to keep going. So we have to keep going. That's all I know.
Now you got to use that strategy every time. Go pretend to take a nap with it.
Well,
but that's
well, I think it's fair to say that it's time to stand up and go with your gut, like the guy that followed the Lone Ranger, who was the only person moving in the opposite direction, and be committed to that, regardless of the noise, I'll call it, that you're hearing on the television, in your phone, in your ear, 24/7. And I'm guilty of it. And, I try to disconnect at night, but it's, we're in a business where that's not always okay to do. But you just have to. You can't be available all the time. So I'm convinced Steve Jobs is not sitting at the pearly gates. I think he's on the other end of the spectrum for creating this.
Well, yeah, I do think it's really dangerous. And I mean, on the one hand, I mean, I do think it's important for us to be aware and to maintain, some understanding what we do. I mean, what's going on around us without obsessing and doom scrolling all the time. And that, and I think it's important
scrolling. I like that expression.
And it's also important for us to keep up with the technology, not just to say, hey, this is not for me. I mean, because if you can only affect it if you're involved in it. But, we have to be wide-eyed about it and say this. I mean, I fully believe that AI poses as much a threat to this country as any foreign power or any, wave of drugs entering the country. I mean, it can remake us into something we're not, and it can reshape the power structure and, make us, hurt the economy and individual. So if we don't get some kind of regulation on it, we're going to be in trouble. But anyway, I digress.
Well, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but although this show will drop next Wednesday, today is election day in some parts of the country. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, particularly in New York City, where you have a socialist out there speaking, and people think Democrats are socialists, but they're not. And somewhere between the two extremes, we've got to find some balance. So I would say you go ahead.
No, I was going to agree. I mean, we need to come. It's alarming, and again, perhaps I'm obsessing with the whole political violence thing because of this podcast I've been immersed in. But, there's a real rise of political violence on both sides, from the Minnesota legislators to Charlie Kirk to everything. There's a lot of political violence in which they try to convince us that we're at war with each other. And we're not at war with each other. But there are a lot of people who want us to be. And when Eric Rudolph, that serial bomber, wrote his manifesto, the one thing that stuck out was when he was asked, why did you bomb an abortion clinic and a gay nightclub and the Olympics? I mean, what do those have in common? He said, the issues were not important to me. It could have been taxes. It could have been gay marriage, could have been abortion, could have been anything. The issues were not important. What was important was sparking the war. And if you think about that, that puts a lot of perspective on it. We fight over a lot of issues that don't matter.
Right.
And it feels like a lot of people really want us to just make enemies of each other, and until we figure out that we're, Americans first, again, then it's going to get ugly.
Well, in a perfect world, which we don't live in, and how I feel from a lawyer's perspective, it's the rule of law that keeps us free. I think it was intended that the freedom of press keep us honest. But once the press becomes a branch of government, where I fear some may see it going, we lose the very independence that the First Amendment was written to protect.
Yeah, we don't want Pravda.
Yeah, and that is, in my opinion, the real truth.
Amen, brother.
Well, thank you for being with me today, John, and I hope to see you soon, and I will continue to read what you write, and if you say something that I don't think is right, I'll call you and you can fix it.
All right. Thanks, Tommy.
Have a great day, and thanks for being on this program. Thank you for joining me today on The Real Truth. My name is Tommy Spina. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you will follow or subscribe to my podcast and listen in to the next episode. If you found it valuable, please take a moment to rate it and review it. It helps us to reach more listeners that care about the issues that matter. Share it with a friend. Stay engaged, and remember, the truth matters. I'll see you next time.